YouTube! Welcome back. My name's Raelia. I'll be reacting to some Max Miller today, what it was like to visit a medieval tavern. I've been really into D&D content lately because I've been watching a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 content, and YouTube is like, oh damn, she likes D&D, show her all the shorts. So I've been consuming a ton of D&D and Critical Role content recently. So I thought this would be very interesting because I'm curious. I'm curious what to order if I ever end up in that kind of conversation. Instance. Yes, speaking is hard. Thank you so much for all the love on my recent videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a like. Anyways. Thank you for the fart angel. Smells like lilacs, my favorite flower. Tell me how the volume is, alright?
While a medieval tavern in a fantasy game might be where you'd go to receive a quest from a hooded stranger in the corner, in real life, it was where you went to gamble, drink, and eat. Perhaps something
and also receive a quest from a shady, hooded individual in the corner.
Something like this bowl of beef pottage known as bukanada. So thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video as we visit a medieval tavern. This time on
Thank you for the
Tasting
follow! Yo, let's go, Giga-chan! Thank you for the follow. Right after I asked for a follow, you delivered.
So if you ever find yourself in the late medieval period and you are in need of food and drink, you better find yourself an inn, tavern, or alehouse.
I watch a lot of D&D stuff, and I also read a ton of manhwa. Which is always in some sort of pseudo-European medieval age fantasy magical world. And whenever they need to gather information, they always go to an inn or a tavern. And it's always drawn like, you know, kind of dingy, sometimes kind of run down. There's a bunch of tables with different groups, kind of like a high school cafeteria. And then there's always a dark corner with a hooded figure. I wonder if that's, true. European aesthetic with Asian manners. Exactly. Yeah, they be European, but they know how to make soy sauce and kimchi. And I'm like, huh? What?
All three of those are not exactly synonymous, and we'll talk about how they're different a little bit later. But in general, you should be able to go to any of them and get a drink and probably some food.
Probably.
Now, depending on the quality of the establishment, you might just be getting some bread and cheese. But if it's a reputable tavern, you should be able to get a bowl of pottage or stew.
What's pottage? What is pottage? Is that like cereal? But izakaya. It's stew. Okay. Wait, why did he say pottage or stew if they're the same thing? Just say stew?
Some of these places might have what today is called a hunter's pot or perpetual stew going. And this is the
perpetual
concept
stew.
Of
I know what that
having
is.
A cauldron of stew or pottage going at all times. Basically, you would take a bowl from it and then replace the ingredients that you just took out, so it's always replenishing itself. Even today, there are places that still practice this. There's a place in Japan who has been serving
what is it called again? Ship of Atheist time. If that pot has been going for 1945, it's 2025 right now. So that's hamada. That is 80 years. That is 80 years. Imagine your first meal could be from this place and your last meal could be from this place. Is it still the same pot of stew though? Okay, look, calculating years is kind of hard, all right? Chill out. Chill out. I don't know. Also, what's the sanitation on that thing? It's like, I guess if you're always keeping it in boil, it doesn't really brew bacteria and stuff, but does it not go bad? Questionable.
And in Perpetual, France, they served the same stew from the 15th century all the way up until World War II.
That's crazy.
When they couldn't get the right ingredients.
Oh!
And in the Middle Ages, getting the right ingredients would also influence what your stew would be.
Makes sense.
You might just get a vegetable pottage, and some place it would just be beans and cabbages, but some places it might be like a fish stew or something with really quality.
Why did that fish have feet? What? Did a foot lover draw that photo? What?
One of the most common stews from this period, which I've found recipes for in pretty much every cooking manuscript from England and France from the Middle Ages, is called bukanada or bukanada. Take veal, kid, or hen and boil.
Hold on. Take a veal, hen, or a kid. Hold up a minute. Wait. Back up. Hold up. One of them is not like the other. Take nada. If he pisses me off one more time, I'm gonna boil him. Kid is a baby goat. That is very unfortunate naming. I didn't know that. A veal is a baby calf, right? And a hen is a female grown chicken. Why is a hen? Why is it a grown chicken? Why not a chick? One of them doesn't fit. Yeah, one of them's an adult. What the? Yeah, I'm gonna ignore what you told me about the goat, and I'm just gonna say that people were eating kids back then.
Boil them in fair water, or else in fresh broth, and smite them in pieces, and pick them clean. And then draw the same broth through a strainer, and cast thereto parsley, sage, hyssop, mace, cloves, and let it boil till the flesh be enough. Then set it from the fire, and thicken it up with raw yolks of egg, and cast thereto powdered ginger, verjuice, saffron, and salt.
This sounds kind of bomb. That's a lot of herbs. I don't think I saw salt in there, but that's a lot of herbs for meat. And it's going to be tender enough to melt in your mouth. That sounds really good, actually. Hold up a minute.
And then serve it forth for a good meat. I just find it so interesting that while the spellings have obviously changed, and they would have been pronounced quite differently back in the day, the words themselves, for the most part, are the same words that we would use today. Now, there are words like smite, which means to cut, but we don't usually use it in like recipes. It's more of a...
Okay, whenever I watch D&D content and a wizard is like, I cast fireball to smite my enemies, I always had a visual in my head that smiting means to like, lightning zap them to ashes where they stand. I didn't know it meant cutting. Don't a lot of magical users use the word smite? So it's cutting with magic? I always thought it was like Thanos snapping it away. Evolution of language for real.
Biblical cutting, I guess. Though maybe we should bring that back. In my next cookbook, I'm going to get rid of the word cut and use to smite.
Yes, and also use kid.
There are a few words in the original that we don't use at all in English today, like éireann, which was a Middle English word for eggs. Though eggs was also a Middle English word for eggs, and it is around the time of this recipe that we see one get picked over the other. In 1490, William Caxton translated Virgil's Aeneid into English, and he was frustrated with how the English language was changing at the time. He tells a story of a mercer or a cloth merchant named Sheffield, and he was from the north of England, and he finds himself in Kent, in the south of England. And he goes up to this woman and asks her for some eggs. And she says, I don't know what you're saying, I don't speak French.
Yeah, you can't just go up to some woman and ask for her eggs.
Eggs is not a French word. But she didn't know the word eggs because she was from the south, and she said éireann. Well, someone nearby overheard the confusion and said, ask for éireann, and he got his eggs.
Isn't egg in current French like ouf or something? Like O-E-U-F or something? Hello? Ding dong? Any Japanese? Any Francais speakers here? Is that correct? How did that evolve?
Caxton admits that he's also confused and finds consternation in these two different words meaning the same thing. And he writes, lo, what should a man in these days now write? Eggus or éireann? Certainly it is hard to please every man because of diversity and change of language. But the thing is, he picked one. And he picked
Lo and
eggs.
Behold. I find Old English so funny.
One he picked in years before because he would write it down and a few people would read it. Great. But he was using a printing press. So thousands and thousands of these were going out. And
most important invention beside fire is fire an invention. Most man-made inventions beside the wheel, the printing press. The printing press. Again and again, it's always you.
And he did that with a lot of different words. He was the one that chose which version we use even to this day. Anyway, I just thought
he was like a language god, huh?
Recipe. So for this bukanada, what you'll need is 3 to 4 pounds or about 1.5 kilograms of beef, goat, or chicken.
Nice. What kind of cut of meat is this? Can you guys tell by just looking at it? Is it ribs? The one on top with the 3 thing is probably short rib, right? What's the stuff in the bottom? It just looks like chunks. Men and their choice of words for eggs. Y'all are so simple. Y'all are such simple creatures. All you struggle with is picking the perfect stick and then picking the perfect word for eggs. It's kind of cute. It's kind of cute. It is short rib, hey? Okay.
I'm using beef. Originally it actually says veal, but I'm just using beef for this. Also, kid, in the recipe it says kid, that is goat.
No,
and
that
I'm
is a
always
kid.
having people saying, it's children.
No, it's children.
It's not. It's goats.
No,
a
it's
small
kid.
handful of parsley, a few leaves of sage, a few sprigs of fresh hyssop, a half teaspoon of mace, an 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, 4 egg yolks, a half teaspoon of ginger, a half cup or 120 milliliters of verjuice.
What's
so what exactly
verjuice?
is verjuice or verjuice? It was a medieval way of making juice from unripened grapes. And so it's not fermented or anything, but it does have this like vinegary kind of acidicness to it, but it's also sweet. So if you don't have it, maybe like half grape juice and half red wine vinegar might mimic the flavor.
Okay. Is this like, if you were to convert it into a modern day cooking recipe, a lot of recipes when it calls for a little bit of acidity, they always use like lemon juice or tomato paste or whatever. And they'll also ask you to add in a little bit of sugar to offset that taste. I wonder if this is just a 2-in-1. How come we stopped using it? It sounds very useful.
Then a pinch of saffron threads ground up and a teaspoon of salt. So
That's
first
a lot
put
of
your
salt.
meat into a large pot and cover it with water or broth or a combination of the two, and then bring this to a boil and reduce to a simmer. And make sure to skim off any scum or foam that forms on top. Simmer this for about an hour or until the meat easily comes away from the bone. And then take it off.
How long is
the
that going to
heat.
take? I feel like if you're just boiling without a pressure cooker, it takes hours. Pressure cooker will speed it up. Otherwise, it's like just simmering for like 4 or 5 hours.
Take the meat out and go ahead and smite your meat.
Smite.
Also, the knife that I'm using is this honkin knife. It's a knife, which I'm now calling my smiting knife.
I want
this
that.
was made for me, handmade by one of my Patreon patrons.
Whoa.
And it mimics an older design from like the early Renaissance, I
Whoa.
believe. I just think it's so cool. So I'll put a link to, because he makes like hand-done knives. I'll put a link to his stuff.
I would love to see that. I'm gonna add it to my throne. I want a good cooking knife. That looks amazing, and I can wave it around to fend off intruders as well. That's a knife. That is a knife. That is a manly knife if I've ever seen one. Whoa. Sugar wasn't available in medieval time. You are correct. You're very correct. I forgot about that.
This is now my smiting knife. So
Anyways.
once your meat is smitten or smited, you want to strain the broth as much as you can until it's nice and clean.
Hi,
Then return the
Break.
meat to
Hi,
the
how are
pot
you?
and add
How's
the broth
work?
back in. Add in the parsley, sage, and hyssop, all chopped very fine.
What's hyssop?
As well as the mace
mint,
and
mint,
the cloves.
right.
Then stir everything together and bring it to a simmer.
This
Set
looks
the lid
like
on the pot and
oh,
let it.
I have that same pot. Oh my gosh! And also, this just looks like beef stew that my mom makes. Wow, that looks so good. I would like some cilantro. Any cilantro haters in chat? If you hate cilantro, I'm sorry. I don't think you can ever eat anything I make. I love cilantro. Hi, Break.
Let it simmer for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, really, until the meat is as tender as you want it to get. Also keep an eye on it because you might need to add some water in case it all steams away, but that's why you want to leave the lid on as you do it. Anyway, while it cooks, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what else you might find in a medieval tavern.
Tell me about the alcohol. I want to know about the alcohol. Beef stews, basic F, they're so good. Meat stew's always good. Hi, Glass.
That
Hi,
in that
welcome
season
in.
on a day in Southwark, at the Tabard as I lay, ready to wend in on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout courage.
This is written by a British man. At the tavern as I lay. Who's sleeping in... I don't even know if I'm making the right jokes. Who's sleeping in a bar? Only British.
That was from the prologue of the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, and being written between 1387 and 1400,
That's old.
It contains one of the first references to a named inn, an actual historic inn. It was called the Tabard, and this is where, in the Canterbury Tales, all of the characters gather just before heading south to Canterbury on their pilgrimage, which is kind of the whole point of the work. Chaucer talks about the owner of this inn and says that he was a very good host. And to the supper he set us straight away. He served us with victuals of the best kind.
Oh, that sounds good.
Strong was the wine, and well pleased we were
Strong was the wine. Yes, that's what I like to hear.
to drink. Now, when I picture this in my mind's eye, I'm definitely influenced by things like Lord of the Rings and,
Yes.
and Dungeons and Dragons
Yes.
and all of these kind of medieval fantasy worlds, but they aren't exactly like that. First of all, there are a lot fewer like orcs and elves.
What?
But also the
What about fairies?
inns and taverns
What
and
about furries? What about werewolves? Oh no, what? I'm so done. I'm so done with this genre. How dare they lie to me? How dare they lie to me? I thought I could see that wolf character from Elden Ring. I thought that was historical. The fuck?
houses of medieval England, at least, were not all the same. They were quite different.
So some of them had
different
furries.
parts in their history. Now, of course, throughout time, their definitions overlapped, and there was a lot of variety within each classification. But in general, you had the inns at the top of the echelon. They tended to be the nicest. And then there were the taverns and then the alehouses at the bottom. The inns, how they started out at least, they were a place for people to stay the night.
Crazy.
Usually they were kind of near the gatehouse of a city or a town, or else in between cities or towns, like a day's walk away, maybe 20 miles away. So it was a
crazy that people used to
walk.
Like they used to use time it takes to walk as a form of measurement. Nowadays we measure it by like car rides or hours of flight. Technology! Maybe another 2,000 years we'll be like measuring stuff by how many light years away it is. Isn't that crazy?
And just like a bed and breakfast, they would often give you some food and drink. But only, just like a bed and breakfast, to the people who were actually staying there. You couldn't roll up. You weren't staying there, you roll up and you're like, I want some grub. That isn't how it happened. Though at times in history, inns found themselves making good money from the food.
So there weren't
drink,
restaurants, I see.
They kind of said, all right, maybe we will just serve to anyone who comes up. And
yeah,
so it was like
why
having
not?
a restaurant in a hotel, which is still a thing today. A tavern, on the other hand, was kind of the opposite. It was a place for people to come eat and drink, mainly drink, but it was not typically a place to stay.
So this is like an izakaya, basically, right? You go there after work, a hard day of manual labor, of catching kids, and then you go there to, share a drink with your fellow kid catcher. I'm talking about a goat, by the way, and just chill out for the evening. Okay, that's cute.
Originally, taverns were places that served wine. They were run by vintners who made or imported wine. And remember, this is a time when wine was actually still being made in England. I think they do it again now, but they had quite a bit of wine being made in England, but it was mostly made by the church, and they kept it all for themselves for, I'm assuming, communion. So
we learned about this when we watched the Too Fancy for Me wine version under Internet Historian. He briefly talked about how the church would have like a whole cellar underneath, and they were like exploding, right? And that was how they discovered how to make champagne. You remember that?
Anyone else?
It's all coming together. Whoa, that's awesome. We're learning.
Wine, which was a lot more expensive. The most common wine in England at the time was a red wine from Gascony that cost about 3 pennies a gallon.
Jesus, that's
twice as
cheap.
Much as the very best ale. Then there was Rhenish wine from the Rhine region, which cost 6 to 8 pennies a gallon.
Jesus, man. Okay, all I'm hearing is if I get isekai back in that time, I'm gonna be a freaking alcoholic. Wow, imagine the amount of gallons. I could buy up the entire wine industry and monopolize it and barely make a dent in my wallet. That's crazy.
Wine, you want to make sure that you're getting actually what you paid for. So if there's any question, you can ask
Kingdom Come Deliverance, the new one, right? The new game.
The cellar to see the actual barrel that your wine is coming from. If a taverner was found to be selling adulterated or counterfeit wine, they would often be punished by being put in the pillory or the stocks and having that offending wine poured over their head, public humiliation. But they would also
just open your mouth and chug. It's free wine, isn't it?
Which basically meant that they lost their business.
There
were actually people whose job it was to go around and inspect the wine. And it was more popular in France than in England, but these people were usually the town crier, and they would do this kind of as part of their job and be called the wine crier. In the 11th century, there was a French writer
the wine
who said,
crier. That's
wine
so cute.
criers cry
That's so
with
cute.
open mouth, the wine which is for sale in the taverns at 4 farthings. Now, some of these taverns were selling the best wine, and some were selling the worst wine, and everything in between. There was a lot of variety. In London alone,
Hi,
in
Rad.
1309, there were
Welcome in.
354 different taverns.
Holy moly.
Lots of variety. And with a population of only 80,000 people, that's like one tavern for every 225 people. So
Even the
business was
kids.
booming.
Yeah.
It's probably why they started eventually selling other drinks commonly, like cider from apples and perry from pears, especially in the West Country.
Oh, I love pear drinks. They're so delicious.
And then mead, which is made from honey. Often that was more expensive and kind of kept for special occasions, but I'm sure you could find different versions all over.
I mean,
Also,
it's okay if you don't drink. There's nothing wrong with that. Drink water. It's healthier.
Called Odin's Skull. It's not so sweet and kind of has a little spice to it.
Yum.
I'll put a link in the description.
Why is this guy selling me everything? He's selling me alcohol and he's selling me a knife. This guy knows exactly what I like.
Pretty good. If you like mead. I should do another mead video because there are a lot of old mead recipes I need to cover. More mead, maybe coming up. Anyway, these taverns, along with all these different drinks that they were now selling, would often start to sell food, and some would even have a room or two to let up, like on the second or third floor of the building. So you can see that the lines between the definitions are already getting blurred. Also, these rooms, you didn't get like a room to yourself. They usually would house like 10 or 12 different people who didn't know each other. It was like mash as many people into these rooms as possible.
Oh, sort of like, what are they called today? Oh my gosh, chat, what are they called today? It's on the tip of my tongue. It's like usually when people go backpacking in Europe, hostels, yeah. It's like a cheap place to stay and you get to meet other backpackers, and that's probably also where you lose your shit because people steal. I have so many stories I heard from friends that backpack through Europe. Oh, homeless shelter. No. Hostels.
If there was a bed, again, lots of people sleeping in the same bed, so it ain't the Holiday Inn. Now, the least extravagant of the three places to get drinks, and there were more places you could get drinks but that we're covering, were the ale houses. And when they started out, they were just that. It was a private house where the wife in the house was selling ale because she would make a big batch of ale. The ale back then, especially before hops, would only last a day, 2, maybe 3.
Oh, wow.
And so anything that the family couldn't drink themselves, she would
only
sell
a
to
day or
everyone else.
two.
And so she would stick a stick or a broom outside of the door, and that was the signal letting everyone know that
I thought she was
going to
put it in the ale.
Eventually, these places too would serve some food, though typically it wasn't the highest quality or as varied a menu.
Right, it's just home cooking.
Bread and cheese, maybe a meat pie, who knows. Now, just because these ale houses were less official than taverns and inns, that doesn't mean that it was just a free-for-all. They were still controlled. They had to sell quality ale. In fact, in some ways, it was even more controlled because ale was such a staple of the people's diet. It was a major form of calories for many people. In 1266,
a major form of calorie. People were drinking all beer to fill their calorie quotas. I guess it was pretty cheap, huh? What did he say? Like a cent or two for a gallon. Old beer was not like modern beer. Enlighten me. They had way less alcohol. Oh, it was like liquid bread. Oh, I see. Okay, I thought everybody was just out here like throwing up on the streets after every meal. Okay, I see it. I appreciate it. Also, their food only lasting a day or two. I think I knew that in the back of my mind somewhere, but I guess I never really thought about it. That's really short. I could never. I'd be eating stuff from like over a week ago in my fridge. If it only lasts a day or two, meal prepping would be fucked. Holy moly.
The assize of bread and ale went into effect. And this tied the price of ale and of bread to the price of wheat. And just like there were the wine criers, there were ale conners who would go around to test the ale and make sure everything was on the up and up. They were sworn to examine and assay the beer and ale and to take care that they were good and wholesome and sold at proper prices according to the assize, and also to present all defaults of brewers to the next court leet. A male baker or brewer who failed to adhere to these new laws ought to undergo the judgment of the pillory without any redemption of money. Likewise, the woman brewer shall be punished by the trumbrel, trebuchet, or castigatory if she offends divers times.
What are these? What are these words?
That is to say, if an alewife flouts the law over and over and doesn't change her ways, then she's going to be punished. And the punishments are all forms of a public humiliation. Though I had to kind of look into trebuchet because I think of a trebuchet and I'm like, were they flinging these poor women into like the walls of castles? So it turns out there are smaller versions of trebuchets that were used just for dunking people into the river, and that's what it was. They weren't trebucheting women across the field.
I mean, that sounds not that bad. That doesn't sound that bad. Yeah, that sounds kind of fun. I mean,
bro, people do that for free at the community swimming pools. You jump on one of those pool levers. What are they called again? Diving boards. You boing, 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 and then go into the water. Mini eat machine. Oh, weekly watered down ale. Okay, I gotcha. Spicy water.
Field. Anyway, if you are visiting an ale house or a tavern or an inn, you'll want to take it easy. Don't go overboard on either the food or the drink, or else...
Oh, my hat is blocking it. Censored, but that's her throwing up. Yeah, that's going to be me in 2 weeks when I'm on vacation.
Might end up like poor Osbert of Elstow. The Bedfordshire Coroner's Roll of 1276 tells us what happened to poor Osbert after he left
Lovely,
the tavern.
indeed.
About midnight on 17th
It'll be a
May,
hell of a time.
Osbert Lewile, son of William Christmas of Elstow, who was drunk and disgustingly overfed,
Also
came
me.
from Bedford toward his house. When he arrived at his house, he had the falling sickness, fell upon a stone on the right side of his head, breaking the whole of his head, and died by misadventure.
I hope that's
and
not
while
me.
Died by misadventure.
I
may
hope
sound
that's
cool,
not
I
me.
assure you, it is not. And it seems that leaving these taverns drunkenly was an ongoing problem and often ended in your demise.
Okay, so they weren't like, the ale wasn't that high in alcoholic content, but people were still getting pretty drunk just based on how much they were drinking. Okay, makes sense. Amateurs. Bro wrote a 1. I know, critical failure. You die. Restart a new character in a new campaign.
Coroner's Roll from 1272, it says that Ralph, son of Ralph, left a tavern and was accosted by
Ralph,
4
son
men.
of a Ralph.
Robert
Wow.
Bernard of Wooton, Robert of Shefford, Richard Norman, and Roger Brienne. I love that every person in this story has a first name that starts with the letter R. Even the tavern that Ralph was drinking at was owned by Robert Allen. Anyway, these 4 men, Robert, Richard, and Roger, ask Ralph if he is drunk.
That's so
and
silly.
he is, and so he drunkenly says, "Who are you?" And in response,
I'm
because
you,
he was
but
drunk,
better.
Robert sprang forward and struck Ralph across the crown of his head with a spark axe, so that blood and brains immediately flowed out.
What the
He immediately
fuck?
lost his speech and died thereof about midday on the morrow. The thing is, these ruffians who accosted Ralph are the exact type of people who would often be in the taverns
Shocker.
themselves. I mean, there were those upscale establishments, of course, but most, it seems, at least that got written about, were dens of scum and villainy that were filled with gambling, drinking, and prostitution. But even with such a terrible reputation, it seems that pretty much everybody found themselves in a tavern at one point or another, even the clergy.
Huh?
But that was quite frowned upon, as can be seen in this letter from around the year 1200. An archdeacon to a rural dean, greetings. We have been given to understand that chaplains in your deanery live in less than upright fashion, for they go to taverns, as we have heard, where they have inappropriate and illicit association with lay people.
Not the lay people. Not the lay people. Arf, arf, hi, Emperor.
With the result that those who say priests are no different from lay people are justified, in order that in the future it cannot be said that, as a result of your laziness, such chaplains have been found in your deanery. Bestir yourself to correct these matters.
Wow. I quite appreciate, as someone whose job is to write polite but assertive, bitch fucking read type of emails all day, I quite appreciate the way the older folks used to tell each other off. Very polite. Lovely. I could learn from them.
Another
You've
letter I
never seen a
found shows that whether you're
bar
a
fight?
layperson
Oh, I kinda
or a
wanna see one.
clergyman, going and gambling at these taverns often led to ruin. In this letter, a man has lent the friend of a friend some money, and now he is asking the friend to pay him that money back. And the friend is like, no, I do not wish to lend him anything of mine, for he is an inveterate dice player, and he loses everything that he gambles. Those who were with him in the tavern when he lost X and his pledges, they gained everything, right down to his drawers. So take care that you refrain from handing over any more of your own money, which you borrowed from me, and so lose on him what you ought to repay me. So should you find yourself in medieval England, maybe stay away.
Dice player. All D&D players are dice players. You're telling me they're basically gamblers. Whoa, I understand why D&D players are so passionate about their craft now. About the game. It's a form of gambling. I can already hear the YouTubers like furiously typing up an essay in the comments.
Away from any taverns or inns that seem a little dodgy. I'm hoping that I have found an upstanding inn in the Porch House.
Yeah, sir, would you please kindly do your fucking job? Scroll down 2 emails in this chain to read the context instead of asking me for it. God damn it.
Now, they actually claim to
How'd you get this job?
oldest inn in England, dating from the year 947. Though there are numerous places that make very similar claims, so it's hard to tell exactly what they mean. There's a wonderful video by one of my favorite creators, Jay Draper. I'll put her stuff in the description. She's great. And she talks about how a lot of places are England's oldest pub or England's oldest
Yeah, I
inn.
hear about that
And
a
it often
lot.
has to do with, like, there is one stone that was here in 1450 and the rest of the place is new. It's like, you know, the pub of
That's what I'm
Theseus.
saying,
But,
the ship of Theseus.
sometimes also it's like, yes, in 900 there was definitely an inn here, and there's an inn here now, but, you know, here it was like a dentist's office, and here was a bank, and, you know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm still really, really excited to go. And perhaps, if I can convince them to really lean into their medieval pedigree and make some bukanada, like the one that I'm about to eat.
Yeah, what
So as
happened to
soon
his
as the
cooking?
meat is nice and tender, take it off the heat, and then it is time to add the egg yolks.
Ah.
Now, if you just add the egg yolks right now, they're gonna scramble,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be unpleasant. So
Yeah.
what you need to do is let the broth cool down just a little bit, and then take a little of that broth and slowly add it into the egg yolks as you're whisking, and they will start to warm up. Keep doing this until you've added about a half cup of the broth, and then whisk in the ginger and the saffron and the salt, and then you can add that to the stew. Finally, add in the verjus, and it is ready to go. And here we are, a bukanada fit for a medieval tavern. So you want to add those egg yolks in like last thing before you serve it, because if you ever have to reheat it, they do tend to scramble a little bit. So they go from thickening it to scrambled. The taste is going to be the same, but the look is a little,
yeah, the texture is
little
going to be
different.
weird.
And I did just have to reheat mine, unfortunately. Doesn't matter. Here we
He
go.
had to
The
reheat
thing
it?
is-
He didn't make this fresh? What? He didn't actually talk about all this while it was cooking in the background? He lied? This was 2 takes? Dude, you can't trust anything you see on the internet these days. I swear, these content creators, it's like I'm not even a wolf girl. It's all lies. It's all lies.
Smells wonderful. The saffron is what hits me. I was worried it was going to be the clove, because that's what was hitting me at the beginning, but now it's the saffron. Here we go.
How does that taste? How is it?
That's really good.
Oh.
That is so interesting, because you get those medieval flavors that you would never find in a modern beef stew. Like the saffron, like the cloves, like the mace,
I'm hungry.
like verjus, which adds this kind of biting acidity without being super acidic, because a lot of medieval dishes will actually just add vinegar, and that is the flavor that you get. This is different. There's more of a sweetness to it. Really, really nice, and the meat just falls apart. Anyway, if you do want to make this, or if I can get that in England to make it, then I will point you toward the Tasting History website, tastinghistory.com, which I made with help from Squarespace, who is today's sponsor. Squarespace.
If I could do cooking streams, I would love to like follow along on some of these recipes. It could be like a cool continuation thing for us. I really want to do cooking streams. I gotta figure that out.
But they're